In this episode, I chat with Aaliyah Nitoto, founder of Free Range Flower Wines, about the age-old practice of women making flower wines around the world. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to the Flower Lounge Podcast. I am really excited to be sitting with a super unique guest that we learned about recently. And her name is Aaliyah Nitoto. And she is the founder of Free Range Flower Winery, which is Northern California's first and only true flower wine. And so instead of making wine from grapes, she makes wine from flowers. And we just thought that was such a cool concept that we wanted to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you for having me.
So we usually start off with this little exercise where we have you close your eyes and go back to a time in your childhood when you played around flowers or plants or trees. And just think about what you were up to and who you were with. See if you can identify a favorite flower or botanical. And then reflect on the 3 words you would use to describe this favorite. And then whenever you're ready, just sort of open your eyes and share everything you're thinking about with us.
Okay, 3 words. Okay, so small, bees, and cows. That's the other word that comes to my
What
mind.
flower are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of clover, like the clover flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would play with the flowers. And it would be covered in bees, and they'd be so happy and content. They'd let you hold them because when bees, after they've eaten, they're not really agitated. And that was one of my favorite things to do.
Oh. And so how did being in the clover make you feel?
I just felt like just really connected to the earth. And, being a child, of course, you're really connected to the time that you're in, and you don't have to concern yourself with being mindful because you are mindful. It's like just what children are. So it just brings me back to that and that mindfulness and like the summer and the smells and the fact that I felt that like bees were my best friends because I could hold them and they were completely chill.
I love that. Okay, because what we find is that usually the way you describe the qualities of your favorite childhood flower is typically the way that you bring your greatest gifts into the world. So the words that I heard you say were happy, content, connected to the earth, mindful, like a best friend, and chill, along with the cows and the bees. Does that sound like you?
Oh, I think so. At least that's what I always strive for, and I try to connect. And those are the things that make me feel, the most me. Yeah.
When you were talking about bees, it reminded me of this experience I had a couple of weeks ago, and maybe you have some insight into it. And then we'll get into the flower wines. But you turn here for a second. Bees. Okay, so I was having lunch with a friend, the acupuncturist that works at our building, and we were eating outside, and this massive swarm of bees came up, and we were both eating like chicken soup or something, and I would say probably around 60 bees just descended in and swarmed us. And I'm the kind of person who loves bees. Like, I don't get disturbed at all by their presence. Like, they can land on my hands and my face. I'm fine. I always figure if they're not agitated, there's nothing to worry about. They're like my friends, right? The same way that you were talking about them. And so, but this lasted for at least 45 minutes. Like the entire time we had lunch, there were bees landing on our hands, on our faces, in our soup spoons, in our laps. And they weren't going to the other people that were eating outside. And I just thought this was the most bizarre and curious experience. It almost felt like a blessing in some kind of odd way. Have you ever experienced that before?
My mother has. She woke up one morning to hear this hum in her backyard, and she went outside to find there were hundreds of bees, like covering her tiny little peach tree.
Whoa.
And yeah, they were getting on her arms and stuff like that. And she was like, whoa, this is really cool. And she pulled out her camera and she started filming it. And she's like, I don't know where all these bees came from, but I know a little bit about bees. And what was happening with her, and may have been happening with you, is it was a swarm. So what time of year was it? Do you remember? It was spring. Yeah, it's like,
I mean, for Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah,
February, spring.
yeah. So in the spring, they like young queens that are ready to leave the hive and go and start one of their own.
Oh.
Peel off and fly away, and some of the hive leave with them.
Oh, interesting.
And they'll swarm like that. She's in the middle of that swarm. So I betcha it happened with my mom. The queen landed in her peach tree. I betcha the queen landed somewhere on your table.
Whoa.
And the other bees came and, decided to hang out with you because the queen decided to hang out with you. Whoa. And so she decided to have lunch with you guys and flew away.
That is really cool.
Yeah, you were visited by royalty.
I knew it felt like a blessing. It felt special. Like it felt special. It didn't feel like, oh my God, attack. It felt, like precious and rare, right?
Yeah.
No wonder we were dining with royalty. That's so cool. I love that. Wow. Okay. So I'm looking at your website as we're talking. There's this gorgeous picture of the sun coming through flowers. And I know you have lavender wine and you have rose hibiscus wine. What the heck? Like, where are you from? Where is this coming from? Like, how did you start this?
So, okay, how did I start this?
How long have you been doing this?
Well, the story about how I started with wine is when I was 10. My mom and her friends were drinking wine, and I couldn't have any, of course. And I wanted to participate, so I decided I was going to make my first wine. And I made wine with grapes and Tabasco sauce and water.
Sounds delicious.
And nobody wanted it. And that was my first time that I started to make wine. And little known to me is my grandfather was a winemaker, and he would make, like, he had chickens and he had a garden in his backyard, and he made wine with elderberries.
Ooh,
and things
yummy.
like that. And so I kind of have it in my heritage to make wine. I think his grandfather did and stuff. And I've always been interested in it. I graduated from college with a degree in biology. And the other thing I've always been interested in as a little connector is herbology. I really love plants. I really love connecting to the way plants nourish us and how their energy helps to bolster our being. And so after college, I got into herbology. And while studying herbology, I found a whole branch of herbology that dealt with winemaking. And herbs. And I thought, whoa, this is really crazy. And the other thing that was really interesting about it was that this was a tradition that was done mostly by women. And I was like, holy smoke, this is really awesome. And it got me really excited. And I looked into it, and, all of the ancient herbalists that were around, and women were making wine and beer for their families. A lot of times in Europe, they were doing that because during a certain history, water wasn't considered healthy. So they were drinking wine. Everybody in the family were drinking wine and beer. And so they were a lot of times making these wines.
Right.
And yeah, and it just got me. And I'm like, why aren't these wines around now? And I look and yeah.
Well, you hear, it's interesting because I don't know if I've ever heard of someone making lavender wine, but I've definitely heard of people making dandelion wine. Have you made dandelion wine before?
I have not made dandelion wine. My winery is in a city, and we do have dandelions, but I'm not confident about their.
Yeah, it's hard to find some that people haven't sprayed, right?
Or that dogs haven't sprayed.
Yeah, you'd need like a full-on organic meadow of dandelion that nobody's
Yeah. Some, or like, a place where the dandelions could be free of these things.
Right.
And so I haven't gotten dandelion wine, although there is a maker of dandelion wine in Oregon that I contacted while I was pulling together my aspirations to make the wine. And she was actually very helpful for me as a little bit of a mentor for me getting started.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And it's just really interesting to me that women are reconnecting with these wines as well right now and pulling them back into the public.
Oh, girl. I wish you could come to Phoenix tomorrow. Can I tell you about the event we're doing tomorrow?
What are you doing?
Oh my God. Okay. So sorry, listeners. For the listeners who are listening, this will come out like later than that event happened. But as we're recording tomorrow, we have an event called Antidote. It's the first that we've done of its type. And we're having Kaya, who's our acupuncturist, do pulse and tongue readings at the front door. Well, at the, in the space when you come in. And then based on the element that you're most needing to nourish in your body or whatever imbalance is happening based on your organs, you are sort of assigned to a table with other folks who have that same thing going on. And then each table will be served. There's 5 different tables based on the elements. And each table will get served, like a sipping glass of herbal infused wines, sakes. I mean, not in the way that you are making wine, but more like an infusion in alcohol, like Chinese herbal tinctures like that.
Yeah.
And then we'll have conversations and things to inspire insights in the groups based on whatever's happening. I wish you could come tomorrow, but
me too. Maybe next year.
Maybe we could throw an event with your wines.
Oh, that'd be great. I love that. Yeah, that was one of the things that I actually actually got me really excited. Is like the first lavender wine I made was actually as a nutrition educator and an herbalist working with people who were having various issues. And I had some clients that had anxiety, a hard time sleeping, and just a lot of nervous issues. And I would make a lavender tincture, and I decided to make it as a wine because I thought it would be more accessible for them to use. And it was a really high amount of lavender, very low alcohol, and it was really lovely. And my clients loved it a lot, and they kept asking me for it in a way that I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is medicine. This isn't like, a libation. And so it's like, I really don't think that you should drink it like that. And so they're the ones that actually first were like, you know what, you should actually think about doing this as a wine. And so from there, I decided to work the recipe until I got it to a place where I thought it was perfect to bring to the public as a wine.
Wow. Okay, so can we talk about that process? Because I'm looking on your site, and so I'm coming from also like herbalism background. So what we would do is take the dry herbs, put them in vodka or something, and let them soak for 1 or 2 months. But you're talking about florification, sort of like vinification, where you're doing fermentation with yeast, right?
So the really cool thing about that is, well, when you're making a tincture, when you're taking an herb and you're putting it in alcohol and you're pulling out the essences so people can use them, and it's really cool because it also preserves them, and as it ages, it actually becomes stronger in a lot of cases. When you're fermenting, the essences actually go through the digestion process of the yeast as well as the sugars. And so basically what you get is a separation of all of the different helpful molecules in the lavender. So just like with a grape, you ferment a grape, you're not tasting grape juice. You're tasting all of the different molecules separated in a way that you can taste all of the nuances of that grape without them being so bonded closely together that that is just one flavor. And the same thing happens with the lavender. And I believe that because of that, there are some characteristics that actually are able to come out even more. There is terpenes. Do you know what terpenes are?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there are actually terpenes in lavender. And some of the terpenes are actually the precursors to THC and CBDs. And the really cool thing about that is because the entourage molecules that are, I don't know if I'm getting too technical, am I?
Hey, go for it. We'll see. I'll see if I can follow you.
Okay, the entourage molecules, meaning like the molecules in the lavender that are helpful, that are around that help it to work, they're different than they would be in cannabis. So those molecules are still ones that have a very similar effect, but the way that they affect you is different because of those. Basically, it's if you think of it like you're making a souffle, and the ingredients, it's like you may have the eggs, and that's the important part of the souffle, but whatever ingredients that you put with the souffle changes the way it's going to react and how it's going to taste and how it's going to affect you. And the same thing is true with like the helpful molecules in the lavender versus the helpful molecules in CBDs and THC. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Yes. So what's the end result of that? Like you will feel...
So the end results of that is that when you take the first sip, usually the first thing people feel is kind of really calming down. Like when you close your eyes and you take that first breath when you're meditating and you just let yourself go and relax, it has that feel to it. It kind of like releases your tension. And as you drink it, it continues to do that, which is really powerful. When I'm talking to people when they're about drinking it, I think that they should be a little bit mindful of that if they're pretty sensitive to that sort of thing, because the alcohol also has a similar quality. And that's one of the reasons why when I changed the recipe so it was something for drinking rather than something for medicinal reasons, I lowered the amount of lavender so you could enjoy it without possibly impairing yourself.
Curling up in the booth and just taking a nap.
Exactly.
And so can you tell us a little bit about how flowers were used in the past for wines? Like, historically, where we've seen this before, because it feels like such a new concept, but it's more like an ancient concept that you're bringing back, right?
Yes, it is. It's like, I believe people were making wines out of anything that they could get their hands on, really, way back in the day. It's hundreds of years old. It's ancient. People, like I was mentioning, in Europe and in the Dark Ages, when they didn't know very much about sanitation and things like that, they would drink beer and wine. And grapes, even though they were around, it's like it was really expensive to get wine made with those things. And back then also people just were making whatever they used. It's not like we do now. We go out and buy, if we need something, we buy it. People, if I need soap, they'd make soap. If they needed, clothes, they'd make the cloth and then make the clothes and things like that. So they would actually make their beer, they would make their wine, and they would make their whiskey. And usually, traditionally, the men were in the fields or doing being blacksmiths and hunting and things like that. And in the house, women were doing all of those things that women do to pull a house together. And one of those things was actually to make the beer and the wine. And that's one of the reasons why wineries they're called wine cellars, is because the people used to have the wine made in their basements.
I was going to ask you, like, in terms of flowers, because we mentioned lavender, rose, dandelion. You talked about your grandfather making elderberry or elderflower wine. Mm-hmm. And are there any other flowers that were used, like chrysanthemum or?
Chrysanthemum, yeah. Chrysanthemum is a wine in China, Korea, and some other countries. They make chrysanthemum wine, and that dates back to over thousands of years, like the Han Dynasty. And it's been used every year, even now to this day, at the Double Nine Festival. Of course, dandelion wine is a wine that was made in it kind of goes back to Ireland. And elderflower wine is a wine that is primarily in northern Europe, Scandinavian countries. In North Africa, with honey wine, there's a tradition of using a lot of flowers and other herbal elements in honey wine and meads that they would have.
Oh, cool.
It's actually just really huge and rich. It's like, as I've gotten into doing this, more and more recipes and more people come up to me talking about the traditions of their family. I even had somebody come to me recently and talk about a grandfather that made wine with tomatoes, which was interesting.
Wild.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe I'll try that one day. It's like, you never know. You really can't ever know, because fermentation changes something so much that it may be good. I don't know.
Right. That's so interesting. It's funny because I tend to, I don't know why of course I know that grape wine is medicinal, but for some reason I tend to think of it more as like an alcohol. And when you're talking about chrysanthemum and dandelion and elderberry, to me that feels more medicinal. And I know there really isn't a distinction there, but it's so nice to know that, something that you're drinking as an alcohol can be medicinal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where they all started. It's like, there's a book called The Drunken Botanist.
I've seen that. It's great.
You've seen that?
Yeah, the green cover. It's a really great book. Yeah,
and I started to read it, and the thing that the author is talking about that I think is really amazing is that if you really think about it, and if you really look at alcoholic beverages, there's not one really that isn't touched by an herb, a plant of some kind, whether it's a fruit or a tree or a bark or a flower or some kind of an herb. They're all, if you like gin, you have juniper, and tequila, there's agave. It's like they all have a plant that's associated with them. And it's not the end product, the alcoholic beverage, that's problematic. It's it's the way that we use.
Right, exactly.
These products that are problematic, a lot of times that in the past they were used as sacred or something to be respected.
Right.
And not something to just like to chug and to use as an enter mean like getting drunk.
Yeah. And I think when you were talking about people making wines in their basements and people making wines in their homes, I think it's like that, right? When you make something, you know what went into it. Like if you make cookies, for example, every cookie you eat's like, wow, because you made it. Or every like, I'm sure when you drink wine, it's like, wow, because you know what went into it. But if you're just kind of sort of like ordering another glass, you may not have the depth of awareness of what went into to it. You think that's part of it?
Yeah, I think that is a part of it. It's really, for me, being a winemaker, seeing somebody pour a glass of wine that I've made and drink it and enjoy it is so satisfying. It's so surreal because I'm like, I made that. And they're really enjoying it. And the fact that I've had people use it in family gatherings or for a wedding or for, you know, their mom's birthday, they're giving her a bottle of it or something like that. It's like the fact that somebody finds it special enough for that is really humbling and makes me feel really good.
I bet. So you must be making it all the time. Like, how big are your batch sizes and how many bottles do you make at a time? And how does that, how does the business of winemaking, flower winemaking work?
Well, I'm fairly new at this. It's like the winery has actually officially opened last July. So it's not even a year old yet.
Congratulations. And you're in Oakland?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, it's really intense. That's the word I'll use, intense, because I could make a 55-gallon batch of wine. And from that, I could make about 30 cases of the wine. And that is such a small batch.
It's a hustle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really small batch.
Yeah.
It's like wine usually is made, in the thousands of cases.
Yeah, massive.
And so 55 cases is, like 30 cases is such a small amount. And there is a hustle. It's like, I feel like I'm a winemaker, and the fact that I have to sell, I really love my wine. I know what it is, and I really want to get it out and have people taste it. But really, if somebody pushed me to the wall of what I'd rather be doing, I'd rather just be making it. But you can't make it. You can't have the capital to make it unless you sell it, and so you have to do everything. And eventually we'll get to the point where I'll be able to get somebody to do those things that I'm not so keen on doing, and then I can stick to the winemaking, and then I'll be a lot happier. And that's really important for me because I have so many other ideas and so many other wines that I'm working on.
Yeah.
And it just slows it down, really. Really. It's like if I can't be in the winery workshopping the wines that I want to make, like lilac is a flavor that I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in marigold.
Oh, damn, that would be really good.
Yeah. It's like, so that's another one that I'm interested in doing. And I even want to start branching out into some more of the fruit wines with herbs, like watermelon with rosemary is something that I really am interested in trying. It's like I started doing that, and it's just.
That sounds delicious. Lilac sounds so challenging. I worked with a woman who makes essential oils, and that's like a, crazy distillation process. And you can't make an essential oil out of lilac because it doesn't survive the distillation process. And so she used to pour wine into the fresh flowers and have just like, you couldn't even add vodka. It was like just wine that you could pour in to extract the volatile aromatics from the lilac. So I would be just like so curious to see how fermentation would affect it.
Usually, like the flowers that I'm using now are dry flowers. It's like lavender. Lavender does better with dry flowers than fresh when making wine.
Right.
And rose and hibiscus work really well with the dry.
That's why I say lilac is so tricky, right?
Yeah, like lilac would have to be fresh.
Exactly.
And it's like if it was dry, it would be ruined. And it's like not only would it have to be fresh, it's like I wouldn't be able to, usually what I do is you pour boiling hot water onto the flowers, and then you pull the flowers out, and the essence that's left over you can use for the wine. But for the lilac, I'm sure what I'll have to do is use cold, like a water that's kind of tepid or like lukewarm, and actually ferment the flower like that, rather than. So it would be something where it has to be really, it's a really delicate situation.
Oh yeah. That's a really expensive one. You have to sell that like 50, 60 bucks a bottle, because you're only going to have very limited quantity production of that one, right?
Yeah, and right now, again, I'm still in the position where I have a limited access to fresh flowers, and so I'm not going to be making that one right now.
Yeah,
I do plan to. While I'm doing all my partner Sam, he calls me a witch, and he says, "Go and do your witchy poo stuff," and and so I was like going to the winery and actually doing my witchy poo stuff and making 5-gallon batches of various things, and having people who are in our wine club actually come by and taste. And that's, it's like for something like the lilac, the first few times around, it will probably be just to that
sure.
group of people.
Yeah, just testing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so exciting. Marigold seems a little easier, a little tougher.
Yeah. But I'm also fine. It's like marigold. It's like the thing with flowers like marigold or even dandelion, it's like you have to be careful of the greenery. The green on the flower tend to be bitter, and so you have to
pull every petal off.
Get the petals away from as much of the green as possible, because you want the petals to be the essence of what you're using. My friend in Oregon, who has a winery that does flower wines as well, she makes the dandelion wine, and it tastes of grass, like fresh mown grass and corn, and it's kind of indescribable, but those are some of the flavors that come across, and it's really light, and it tastes like spring. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds amazing. How fun.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to visit your winery, they would come to see you in Oakland, right?
Well, yeah, and we have a tasting room once a month.
Cool.
Every second Sunday at Wine and Design in Jack London Square in Oakland.
Fun.
Yeah.
Okay. And if anyone wants to check out and taste the wines, you have lavender wine right now.
Yeah, I have the lavender wine right now, the rose hibiscus. I should talk about my lavender. I talked about my friend's dandelion, but I should really talk about my wine.
Tell us.
It's like
everything.
So the lavender wine is a light pink to peach color, depending on how it ages. It starts off as a light, almost cotton candy pink color, and as it ages, it turns a little bit more and more golden until you have a peachy golden color to it as it ages. And it has notes of juniper, sage, aniseed, lemon, and it is effervescent. So you have a little bit of a bubbly on it. And it's just really refreshing. It has what I consider an implied sweetness. It's dry, but because it has this beautiful floral nose, when you pick up your glass and put it to your mouth, that the first sip that you get has this sweetness that resolves quickly into the dryness that it is. And it's just really nice. It can be used as an aperitif, which is something that you would drink with cheese and meats and stuff like that, or like hors d'oeuvres before a meal. Or it's really good with brunch, and is amazing with cocktails. And I love to use it as a substitute for champagne sometimes, if you want something that's a little bit more full and bold. It is a really great substitution for champagne. Yeah, and that's my lavender wine.
Tell me about the hibiscus.
Okay, so it's rose and hibiscus. So it has both flowers, and it is a red color it's a really vibrant red, almost like a ruby in color. And it has notes of, on the nose, you smell vanilla. You smell vanilla. And it tastes of raspberries, sage, and cedar. And it's a still wine. And it's just, as you're drinking it and as it is exposed to the air, it actually becomes spicy. So if you like swirl it around and you like let it sit and open up, it becomes spicier, almost like a peppery quality to its flavor.
Wow, it sounds delicious.
So those are my girls. Yeah, I can't wait to start my other ones and have some more offerings out there for everybody.
Okay, so if anybody's hearing this and they're like, oh my God, I've got to try this, you want to visit the website freerangeflowerwinery.com, and that will have the 2 flower wines featured, more to come in the future. And if you're ever visiting in Oakland, second Sundays for the tasting, right?
Yeah, if anybody wants to, we're out of the rose hibiscus right now, but we will be having some more in the spring. So if anybody would like to know when that's available, they can join our mailing list at the website. You can go onto the website and sign up on our mailing list, and you can find out when that's going to be available.
I love it. Is there anything else that we should just absolutely must know, either about your wines or flower wines in general, that we didn't cover?
Well, one thing I mentioned that the wine was primarily made by women, but I think that it's really important for me to say again that bringing these wines back to the forefront for me is really important, because women in a lot of ways have been lost in history. A lot of the things that women were doing that were really important for our world have been kind of pushed under and not considered as important. So it's really important for me to bring this out. And 5% of the proceeds for the lavender wine goes to an organization called Girls Inc., which is an organization that provides social, emotional help with schoolwork and things like that, and basically help young girls become strong women that will be our leaders for tomorrow. And that's really important for me.
Love it. So in wrapping up, do you have any last sort of words of wisdom or advice that you find yourself commonly giving others, or just any words that spring to your heart? It can or doesn't have to be about wines or flower wines. It could be about life, about anything jump into your mind.
Well, just giving things a try. It's really important. One of the things I've noticed, as a nutrition educator and as a winemaker, is there's a lot of things out there that we limit ourselves to because they're foreign. Just for example, with food, people will not want to eat a vegetable or a recipe or something like that they don't know, they've never had before, because it's a little bit strange. You lose a lot of pleasure by limiting yourself. And I think it's really important for us to you don't have to like everything. You don't have to, you don't have to take things to heart, but it's really important to try, because you just miss out on so much if you don't know.
Yeah, if you don't take that step, just try it, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not your favorite thing, it's like an experience of something different.
Yeah.
I love that. I remember working with a perfumer in San Francisco, and I think it's very similar to the world you're in. It's like when you start distinguishing like different notes and smelling things and tasting things, it kind of dissolves the I like, I don't like, good, bad. It's just sort of another new discovery, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, even if something isn't something your favorite, or something like, whoa, that was really crazy, I don't think I'll ever try that again, it still might be one of your favorite memories. It's like it still may be something that is really important for you. And it's like, for me personally, there have been things in my life where I've tried them and I'm like, I really don't like that. And then down the line, I find myself craving it and wanting it, and realizing it's something that I really need in my life. Yeah. Like okra. I used to hate okra.
Oh, yeah. It reminds me of bitter gourd.
Yeah.
Have you had bitter gourd?
I have. And that's something that I haven't been able to flip this. I know it's really incredibly healthy for you, but I've not been able to get that one. Every once in a while I do try it though, again, to see if things have changed, but that hasn't. But okra, just one day I just started eating it and it was like, this is amazing. And now I love it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think sometimes the things that initially we may not enjoy end up being things we crave. I feel that with bitter gourd, that I make it a lot, and I'll have friends over and say like, okay, you have to have it at least 3 times, because the first time you eat it, the second time you can bear it, and the third time you kind of like, this is good, and then after that you start craving it. Yeah. It's so good for the body, but it's like an experience we're not used to with so much bitter. Same with your okra, right? It's kind of like slimy and strange.
Yes, it's just, and it's a texture difference, and it's like, the thing is when it's just what do they call it, an adaptive response, that you have. It's like when you're little, it's like you learn what's good to eat and what's not good to eat by your parents, but they may not have all of, they may not have an exposure to a lot. So your palate might be really limited, or, just narrow, not like it's not bad, but just not very varied. So it's like you can expand that. You can get more food into that. And, I talk about being a nutrition educator. It's like that is, a lot of people don't eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. And when they start eating them, at first it's actually strange to them. Eating the processed food seems natural and good, and fresh food isn't. So it's like, it's just a really interesting, and it's kind of a head trip. And I think it's really important for people to push that boundary, and that way, they'll have more wonderful experiences, and actually have an increased possibility of health and things like that.
Totally agree. I love it. Try new things. Okay, on that note, I am going to buy some flower wine from your website. And you should give me your address so I can send you some flower essences as well.
Okay.
You might find that interesting. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Really appreciate it.
I am so happy to be here. It's like, this is the first time I'm ever doing this. I'm talking about doing something new and tasting something new. and this is really, this is really cool. It was really nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Again, if you're listening, check out freerangeflowerwinery.com, and we can do a toast together. Thanks so much, Aaliyah. Thank you so much for listening to The Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.